Hi everyone, this is Rachel Firehammer, and I'm going to kind of show you around the student side of my dream project. So I teach 10th grade US history as one of my subjects, and this class goes from the periods of the Civil War to as close to the present day as possible. And wars are pretty much the subject that most of my students are very engaged and very excited to learn about. And when we had started this project, I had just finished my World War I unit, and I was like, well, I think it would be kind of interesting to tackle that unit and incorporate more new media texts and tools within it. So that's what I've decided to do, is take my unit on World War I. And I decided to put it all into Google Classroom because it's already a tool that I use with all of my classes anyway. All of my subjects have a Google Classroom, and I really like that it's a nice, easy platform for students to get on and to use, and they can see all my announcements, and I can link all of my presentations and my Google Docs and anything that I want them to use and to see right there. And I've also wanted to use more aspects of Google Classroom within my class anyway. I've wanted to kind of make it so that their learning targets are on there more, and kind of what we're doing. Warm-ups, bell ringers, discussion questions. So I figure it would also give me a great chance to use a couple more aspects of Google Classroom that I haven't used and play around with them before I start incorporating them a little bit more into my classroom. So on the screen you can see here at least the top of my Google Classroom, and what I've done is I've sort of separated it into each day by day what we're going to be doing. So day one is at the bottom, and what I do is I just say day one, here are the learning targets, so that students, when they come and they look at the Google Classroom every day, they can go, all right, this is what I should be able to do by the end of class. So that's kind of how this is set up. My starting point for this unit, it was a lot of kind of reading out of the book and doing a lot of book related things instead of computer related things. This is only my third year teaching, so I'm still trying to get my feet under me while I'm working here. So I've been slowly straying away from just reading in the book and using just the book to using a lot of other materials. So this was a great way for me to kind of get out of my comfort zone and start to look at a lot of new materials to even incorporate into all of my other units as well. So I'm only going to briefly go through a couple of the different things that I've included on here, because I've actually kind of put in a lot, because it is a 13-day unit, so it's kind of long. One thing I do want to say is I have a lot of Google Docs and Google Slides in here, mainly like right here. Mainly I like to use Google Slides in everything that I teach because I think it's a great way for me to create short little bursts of presentations. I try to make sure that there's not a lot of words within each of my Google Slides to reduce the cognitive overload, and I use a lot of visuals as well to get students really thinking about what's going on and highlight the different vocabulary that they have for the unit. And I really like the fact that I can then just post them into Google Classroom, and so students don't have to necessarily worry about hastily writing stuff down as I'm talking, but they can look back on it later on. The other aspect of Google Classroom that I played around with a lot is creating questions. I love using discussions within my class, but besides just calling on every single individual student in my classroom, it's going to be hard for me to actually hear from everybody. And I'm kind of sick and tired of saying, get out a half sheet of paper and then bringing home half sheets of paper to look at. So instead, I wanted to try this question feature of Google Classroom. So I've got a couple of them strewn throughout my Google Classroom here. This first one goes along with the fact that they were to read a Supreme Court case that actually took away some of people's freedoms during the war, and do they think that that's okay? And so here I've had them kind of be able to comment on it, and then they have to comment on somebody else's as well. So a great way for them to engage in the material, and then a great way for me to see like what they got out of the reading that they had to do. I also incorporated Flipgrid at one point within my unit. I have not actually used that in my classroom, but I've been always excited to incorporate it as I found it kind of fun. So the way that I incorporated it is through an already pre-existing jigsaw activity where students were learning about kind of 4 big reasons why we entered World War I. And instead of kind of writing notes down and then teaching one another through those notes, they would get into, or I'd assign them one of these topics, and they would simply have to create a short video to describe that reason of why we got into the war and the impact of like why it brought us into the war. And then they would have to watch other reasons or other videos to get those other reasons there. So I thought it would be kind of an interesting way to have them engage with one another through videos instead of just face-to-face. My biggest area that I incorporated a lot of different new media, text, and tools is through this research project that I have. I'd already had this research project, but instead of having them do like Canva or Prezi, they just actually type stuff into a Google Doc. And while that was fine, I felt like it was lacking this creativity and engagement. The students were simply reading and then regurgitating the information. So instead now they have groups in which they've been given a topic. They read about the topic in their book. They get 3 to 5 additional facts, and they're putting it on Google Slides, Prezi, and Canva, which I think are great platforms to help students summarize information. But also, I think when you go through and look at a Canva or look at the Prezi or look at that infographic, you're also reducing your cognitive overload as well. Because the students, after they spend a couple of days putting these together, we are going to have a gallery walk, and they'll go and they'll showcase and they'll look through each of the presentations. So instead of reading a whole Google Doc, they're going through and mainly looking at images in order to get the information from each of the projects. So a great way to include more engagement in the project, but also reduce their cognitive overload as they're learning about each of them. The last thing that I want to kind of talk about is my Kahoot and my Padlet, which I've got up here. I already have Kahoot for this unit, and I have them for all units. I love playing Kahoot. I think it's a great way for us to review before a test, and it helps them to, and it helps even them to know what they don't understand so that they can go home and review that before the test. I also included a Padlet for my review. Normally my review days before we play Kahoot, I'll be like, what do we know about the unit? And they'll write stuff down on the whiteboard, and it'll be all of these words about the unit, and it'll be great. But then if they don't take a picture of the whiteboard, they don't have that to study off of and to look off of later. So instead, what I did is create a Padlet that I would share with everyone, and they can write names, dates, whatever they remember about each of these 5 big topics that we discussed in the class. So now we could have this up on the board, we can talk about it, and then they can have it when they go home as well. So lastly, just some challenges that I had kind of putting this together is that I know some of my students don't have access to technology at home. So therefore, assigning a lot of these new media tools to do as homework was going to be challenging. That actually occurred to me when I was creating the Flipgrid. I wanted them to actually create a video for them to do as homework with some of the reasons. And I figured, I don't know how many of my students have smartphones, computers, internet at home. So I kind of changed it up and made it so that it was more of an in-class activity. Another kind of challenge that I had is I really wanted to put this YouTube video into Edpuzzle, and Edpuzzle didn't quite have it in their YouTube or Crash Course section, and I didn't know how else to put it up there. So I kind of had to say, just watch the video and write down 4 reasons. But overall, I was really surprised with how much fun it was kind of coming up with different ways to incorporate technology. And I felt like it was going to make the lesson a little bit more engaging to students than just simply read this and do this. So I'm really excited to kind of see how this unit will play out next year when I teach it, and I'm hoping that my students really enjoy it as well. So thanks for watching my video and looking at my student side of my dream project.